Alright, today your objective is the students will complete park practice problems in order to better prepare themselves for the park exam and their unit assessment. So remember, these questions are park practice problems. They're a little more advanced than what we're used to, but I do want to get you guys to see what the park and the math gods are expecting you to be able to do. It will also help you with your BCRs on your test. So you're going to complete the problems along with the video, and then there's 7 problems at the end of the packet that are pretty basic that you should be able to do. So the first question we're going to do is question 20. So you want to find question 20 in your packet. So you have a circle O, so that means O is the center, and you can see none of the segments go through the center, so we don't have a diameter anywhere. A, B, C, and D are on the circle. I'm just going to do some highlighting. Arc AD is congruent to arc BC, and then the measure of arc AB is twice the measure, so twice means 2, of BC. So I'm going to color code. So that is the one that's twice the measure of BC. And then we have arc AD, which is congruent to arc BC. So I'm going to call arc AD and arc BC X, because we don't know them. And then we now know that arc AB is 2 times X because it's twice the measure of that arc. Alright, so part A, you're looking at the measure of ACD, so I would first find ACD. So angle ACD, and we're comparing it to angle ADC. So you want to find those angles. Use the vertex part to help you. So ACD is this guy right here. Okay, so I would make a note that if you kind of extended, you don't have to, angle ACD is an inscribed angle. So the measure of angle ACD. So it's inscribed, which means its vertex is on the circle, and it's going to be half the arc. So you want to find the arc that it makes. So angle ACD's arc, it happens to be X, so the measure of the angle is going to be 1/2 X. And now we're going to find the measure of angle ADC. So that's this whole guy, and it makes this angle. Okay, so that's also inscribed. Which means it's going to be half the arc. Okay, so let's figure out the arc that makes that angle is 3x. So now we know the measure of angle ADC is 1/2 of 3x. Okay, so if you distribute this, we know that 1/2 times 3 is 3/2, or you could write it as 1.5x. So basically the measure of angle ADC is 1.5x, and then this guy up here is 0.5x. So you want to see, how is angle ACD, so how is 0.5x related to 1.5x? Well, it's definitely not equal to. 0.5 is not half of 1.5, and it's not twice. So the only ones left are 1/3. So is 0.5 1/3 of 1.5, or is 0.5 3 times 1.5? And hopefully you can decide that, hey, it is 1/3. Because if you check it, 0.5 times 3 gets you to 1.5. Okay? Alright, the next one, they're asking you to compare the measure of angle ADC. which we now know is, however you want to write it, I'm just going to write it as 1.5x. How is that related to angle BCD? So you want to go back up and find the measure of angle BCD. BCD is this whole guy. It's also inscribed, and it's also made by an x and a 2x. So it's going to be half of 3x, which is 1.5x. So it's equal to. Okay? So again, this is what they are expecting you to be able to do. All right, now you're going to turn to question 24. All right, again, we're going to use the information in part A and B for the question. We have circle P, diameter BD, so you can see segment BD goes right through the center, and you have a triangle in there. The length of segment PC is 10, and that is a radius, so we also know the length of segment PD is also 10. So we might have an isosceles triangle here. Alright, so then the measure of CBD. CBD is x. Okay, and then the measure of BCD is x plus 5. So that's the whole thing. X plus 54, sorry. And that is the angle that makes the diameter. Okay, so we know a couple things. That angle is going to be 90 degrees because angle BCD makes a 180 degree arc, and it's inscribed, so half of 180 is 90. So we know that x plus 54 has to equal 90, and if we solve for x, you get 36. Okay, so this might be a grid-in type question where you would grid in 36 and then you would bubble the 3 and the 6. Okay? Alright, the next thing we're going to do is we have to figure out about length CD and the measure of angle CPD. Alright, so what I would do first is we now know that x is 36. So I'm going to replace the x with the 36. And that's an inscribed angle. So you know the arc that it makes is 2 times that. So this arc is 64. Okay? The central angle right here is 64 degrees. And then you know you have an isosceles triangle, so you can find the base angles. So here's where it gets a little crazy. These base angles, if you find the missing angles of a isosceles triangle, end up being 54. Okay? So I'm going to pull this triangle out and say, hey, we got P, C, D. We have two 54s. And a 64. Oh, just kidding, guys. Did you know that Miss Bailey made a massive mistake? Because 36 times 2 is not 64. It's 72. My B. Okay? Which makes that 64 degree angle actually 72. But guess what? The other angles are still 54. Whoopsies. Okay? So then, if you check that, 54, 54, and 72 should add up to 180. Alright, so then they're asking us about the length of CD. So I also, Sugarfoot, labeled that wrong. So what happens when you're tired. All right, so the length of CD. Well, you know it's across from the biggest angle. So it's going to be the longest side because it's across from the biggest angle. So it has to be greater than 10 because those sides were 10. And then, so you see how A through C talk about the length of CD? So you're probably not going to select A and B or A and C because the length of the side can only be one thing. And then the last three answers talk about angle measures. So triangle CPD is obviously not equilateral because not all the angles are 60. And CPD was 72, so it's greater than 60. Okay? Again, a little funky, but that's what they want you to do. All right, number 8 is super duper doable, I think. So label what they tell you. The measure of angle C, B, D is 44. Oh, okay. All right. So we got to find this guy. Well, in order to find that guy, you might want to find that arc because you know that that angle is half of that arc. So the power of radiuses, BD and CD are radiuses, which mean you have an equilateral triangle. So those sides are equal, which means your base angles are the 44s. And then your missing angle, oh snap, let me grab my calculator, or I could just do it in my head. So the vertex angle would be 44 plus 44, which we all know is 88. And then take 88 away from 180. A little old school subtraction. 2. 0. So 17 minus 8 is 9. So that angle is 92. Now that is a central angle, which means arc BC is 92, which means angle BAC is 1/2 of 92, which is 46 degrees. Okay? Alright, last one. There is a BCR type question like this. So you have an octagon and you want to figure out what transformations, so basically a rotation or reflection, will map PQRSTVWZ onto itself. So what I do is I just kind of go through and check each one. So if you reflect Q over QV, so I would make a QV line. And then I would just kind of match my points up. Does that look like W to T, everything matches up? It should. So check. All right, and then moving over RW. Okay, so that's a symmetry line, so that works as well. Okay, and then reflecting over TV, segment TZ, sorry. And if you look, you can see the major difference there, that that's not a symmetry line, so that does not work. Okay? All right, and then the last couple talk about rotating. So remember those flower questions where we did 360 divided by the number of petals? You could do that here, and we could just do 360 divided by the number of sides, which gets you to 45. Okay? So if you rotated that 45 degrees, around point Z, that would also work. Just kidding, that does not work, because if you notice, Z is not the center. It has to be the center of the octagon. Okay? And then what happens is any multiples of 45 around the center could be an answer. So in those rows questions, we asked you for the smallest. So in our case, the smallest would be 45 around point C, which isn't listed, but any multiple of 45, so 90, 135, would work as long as it's around point C. Ta-da! You now need to finish the 7 questions in the back and then turn your packet in.